Hi, welcome to A Glimpse into the Moment. I'm super excited for today's episode. Today I have a special guest, Officer Marc Slagle. He is with our local police department in the community where I live, and we've been trying to coordinate for a while, but I've got him on here today, and he dialed in. We had a great conversation, so many resources, so much information. And to be honest, Officer Slagle was integral to my mental stability after I separated. But before I went public and before I actually filed for divorce, when I got the confidence to share with him how scared I was and what was happening, he immediately gave me lots of his knowledge. He shared his knowledge. He shared resources. He encouraged me to file police reports on certain things and encouraged me that if the rage got out of control, to call the police. His insight was invaluable to me in me being able to move forward and get to the next step and the next step and the next step and the next step. He is a good friend and a great community volunteer and service officer. So I'm going to launch us into that podcast. It does not stop into that interview on the podcast. It does not stop. It runs straight through. And there's one moment kind of in the center where we lost connection for just a moment. So hang through that one moment that may or may not have shown up as that connection loss, the same way that I hear it. So hang through that. Great information, great resource, Officer Marc Slagle. A glimpse into the moment. I really appreciate you taking some time to visit with me today and to visit with my listeners. I want to turn it over to you for a moment, let you introduce yourself, and let's start there.
Okay. Well, good morning, Nita, and whatever time it is to everybody else. Good afternoon, good evening. My name is Marc Slagle. I am a 12-year veteran police officer. I started off working as a police officer in Florida with 250,000 people, and have come out to Oregon, worked in population sizes down to about 3,000, and now working for a city that's about 10,000 people. So I have a lot of experience working in a variety of locations and demographics. I'm also a 16-year and counting veteran with the Coast Guard Reserve. I've been deployed overseas a few times and enjoy doing all of that. And I am the father to a incredible and wonderful so far 3-year-old son.
Very active 3-year-old son.
Very active, yes. He keeps me young.
Well,
or
Marc, I
makes
want to.
me old. I'm not sure.
Oh, no, keeps you young. Children keep you young,
Yeah.
young at heart, if not young in everything else. I'm so glad that you were able to come on today and visit with me about domestic abuse and partner abuse and how that looks from the law enforcement side of that very, very untalked about reality. I mean, is it a reality that this happens? And a lot of homes hide that that's happening. But I'm sure that there are a lot of homes who are actively putting in calls for help. And I really wanted to, I guess, get your insight on, in my situation, I was terrified to call the police. I was so ashamed. I was so fearful of the judgment. I never called the police. And later, way later, when I sought counsel from you about my situation, you were like, why haven't you called the police? And to me, it seemed
Yeah.
so foreign. I had never realized I could call the police for rage and anger and non-physical altercations in my home. So maybe you can talk a little bit about what that, when should people call the police? What does it look like when you do call the police?
So the reason I encourage you to call the police, and I encourage other people to do as well. It's because we don't want to get it to that point where it becomes physical in nature. When people are acting out with anger and they're yelling and they're very verbal, it doesn't take much for some people to get pushed over the edge to the point where they'll actually hit you or kick
Yeah.
you or throw things at you or whatever it is that they leash out in the physical and violent nature. So we prefer to have somebody call us. And I'd say there's probably around 3 or 4 different types of scenarios that we deal with. And domestics are one of the staples, I would say. I hate to say it, but it's one of the staples of our job that we deal with the most.
Really?
And it's either we're called by neighbors who hear yelling through the walls from outside because it's really loud. They hear things being thrown around. Those situations are a little bit more difficult for us to go into because we have no idea what's going on other than what we're being told by a third party.
Yeah.
Then there's the ones where we go there for an unrelated matter, but we can of possible domestic abuse, whether it's physical injuries or somebody appears to be cowering in fear from the other person not being permitted to talk. I've seen
Yeah.
that a few times. Like they try to control the situation and not let the other person talk when I'm asking that person questions and not, let's say let's just flip the situation because this is realistic.
Yeah.
I'm asking a male questions and the female keeps interrupting and trying to talk for him. It's not as
Oh,
common, but it is still
it
more
happened.
common than people would think, for sure.
Yeah.
Those things are signs to us. And then there's, of course, the ones where people call in themselves to report it on one party or the other. In the middle of it, they call preemptively because they think their partner's going to call and accuse them of things, so they want to call first. It just all depends on the scenario and the
Um,
situation. But we definitely want people to call in because we're not counselors, we're not therapists, but in a way we are the first step in that line of things where we can come in, separate people, calm people down, and then give them resources or options to separate for the night, to seek additional help, or just to look at their situation in a realistic light that's not involving the passions of the moment and be like, look, guys, the toddler peed on the bed, but that's what toddlers do. It's not the end of the world.
wow.
Let's put this in perspective.
Yeah. So, what happens when it does escalate when you're there? And obviously, sometimes people probably get arrested. I mean, for me, when I was in that space of I don't know what to do, I was always so afraid that it would escalate to the point that he would get arrested. And then, um, I mean, fear locked me from taking any kind of an action at all, which was really debilitating.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when you do show up on a site and it escalates? What does that look like?
So I guess I need you to define escalate. Are you talking about physical escalation or just verbal?
Well, both. So both, because
So
in yeah, let me listen and then I'll redirect.
for a verbal altercation, we actually have it titled as a domestic verbal when the call comes out for us. So we know more what we're getting into. The dispatchers are very good at trying to uh, get as much information beforehand while we're driving to the location, to the call, to help us respond better and know what we're stepping into. Because honestly, domestics, traffic stops are some of the highest, most dangerous things for law enforcement to get into because passions are already raised up. People are afraid they're going to go to jail. They're angry at the other person, and so here comes the police with a badge and all this authority, and how dare you step into our lives? And so, hey,
Right.
we become a target all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And so we like to have all the information we possibly can. Now that being
Yeah.
said, a verbal domestic, we go in there, we separate the parties if we possibly can. We try to respond with at least 2 officers just for safety, uh, and we talk to them, find out what's going on, sometimes we have to stop people because they'll go on a tirade, and we're like, no, 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 I don't care about what happened 20 years ago. Tell me what's happening today. Why am I here right now?
Mm-hmm.
And we try to walk through all of that with them and then say, okay, so sounds like he's intoxicated. You're angry because he won't let you have the remote control. He's angry because he was watching his show and you come home and like, I want to watch my soap operas, whatever. Well, that's not the end of the world, guys. Can we separate for the night and agree to be, just quiet? Or can we give one of you guys a ride somewhere local? Can we call a friend to pick you up? What can we do to try to resolve this?
Mm-hmm.
Verbal domestics, I would say, very, very rarely end in a arrest unless
Mm-hmm.
there's something else going on, like one party has a warrant or something of that nature.
Yeah, when you
It's
show up
not
on
criminal.
site.
Yeah, it's not criminal for people to argue and for people to yell at each other. It's not. There's nothing illegal there. It happens all the time. It's called human nature. So calling us for that, for you hearing somebody else yelling, your neighbors yelling, and you're concerned because there's little kids in the house, they're not going to automatically get arrested. That's not what we're there for. We're there to try to make sure that nobody's gained injured, and then after we verify that that's the case, that nobody's hurt, to just make sure that the peace is going to be kept from that point forward, so we don't get additional calls back to the same place.
Gotcha.
So if you're concerned about your partner being arrested because you called because they were yelling and screaming, I wouldn't be really worried about that. That's not what we're there to do.
Okay.
There's other signs of abuse going on that's physical in nature. And in that regard, it's actually a mandatory arrest by Oregon statute. And a lot of
Oh.
states have the same thing. So if we see physical abuse and it's domestic related, meaning they're intimate partners, or it's family related, mother versus son, things of that nature. They reside in the same household and they have some sort of familial relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And there's physical injury, and we could prove that it was caused on purpose, not by accident. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you opening the door, not realizing
Someone was there.
your daughter was behind the door, that's not criminal. We're not going to arrest for that.
Yeah.
But we are required to make an arrest. And it's because of cases where the intimate partner or other family member said, I don't want to have him arrested. And because they were in fear, they were afraid
Yeah.
that as soon as the police left, if he had been arrested or she had been arrested and they came back after they got out of jail, then it would be much worse because the person
Escalate.
had them arrested. So the Oregon, legislation took that decision away from the victim and put it upon themselves, saying law enforcement shall arrest in a domestic abuse situation. That way, the victim can't be blamed by the perpetrator. Although, and realistically, there probably will be, but they can honestly say, I didn't want this to happen. And the district attorneys will, based on the facts and circumstances of the time, make the ultimate decision as to whether they want to pursue on behalf of the victim, whether the victim wants to or not, because the perpetrator needs to go away. This could be a pattern where it's been happening, where it's serious enough where it's like, hey, or let's say we have a case where somebody's dating another guy, let's say there's a guy and this lady's dating this guy. She doesn't know his history, but we find out, hey, he's been arrested for domestic abuse in the past.
Mm.
He hits her, somebody calls the police, her neighbors, whatever. And we go there and she's like, I don't want to press charges. I love him. And we're like, yeah, well, sorry, but he's going to get arrested. It's not only the law, but this is also a pattern for him.
Wow.
And we want to stop that pattern because people like that don't deserve to have the same freedoms as we do when they're, being physically abusive to others. So,
Right. I think that when you're in that space of being the victim of abuse, you're so lost down this rabbit hole of fear that it is like the rational conversation that you approach that with, the logic that you're approaching all that with is not even visible to you as a victim. And what does it look like? Let me deepen this a little bit. What does it look like if you have, so in my home, there was a moment in time when I was looking at separating, and the partner came back at me and said, "Well, I'll kill myself." What do you recommend that I could have, should have done in that situation?
So I would say there's a couple things. One, never take it upon yourself emotionally, which is hard to say and hard to do, but never take it upon yourself if somebody says they're going to kill themselves or they want to die or whatever because of something you did. People are in control of their own lives.
Okay.
They cannot transfer that power and authority to you. If they want to kill themselves for whatever reason, it might be because they're upset and they're sad or whatever. Never harbor that upon yourself as if I had only done something different. Now, that's different than saying don't seek help for them if you truly believe that that's the case. But what you just described is a classic manipulation that a narcissist or that type of person try to keep you under their own control with
Yeah.
no real intention of actually harming themselves, but they know that saying those words will create a type of response in you that'll
Hmm.
make you stay out of fear that
Hmm.
they will actually do it and then it'll be all your fault that you caused them to kill themselves. That's not the case. Very, 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 very rarely would that actually be realistic. And if that's the case, there's you don't need to be in that situation in the first place. You don't need to live in fear that somebody's
Yeah.
going to kill themselves because you wouldn't stay with an abusive relationship. If you truly think that suicidal, then call us and we will take them in for mental health help.
Okay. So how would my brain is walking through my past and this conversation at the same time. And it's like this collision of like, oh, you know what I mean? Like,
You're
I
welcome,
didn't
Nita.
choose. Yes, thank you, Mark. I didn't choose to call the police that day. What I chose to say back to my husband at that time, and was really like, are you serious? Like what you just said? Then I need to call the police. I need to call an ambulance. I need to call your doctor." And there, I knew mine was never physical abuse, Mark. It was always mental and controlling and stalking. It was all these insidious ways, gaslighting to control my mind. And really, my mind was very, very, very much putty to this person. And he just easily manipulated me away from making that call because that would have taken an insane amount of courage to dial the police to come. And I live way out in a remote area, so it wouldn't have been you responding. It would have been a state agency or a county agency police, which can take a lot of time. And that's a reality for a lot of people when things escalate. There's a time gap from when police get there. What does that look like from your perspective?
The gap itself, or
Yeah, like there's a lot of things that can escalate. Well, both, I
well,
both
I'll say
meaning,
from our end, domestics are a top priority call. So we label things in level of priority. So
gotcha.
traffic accidents going to be high, and things like that. Welfare check will be kind of lower. Um,
Yeah,
so domestic is going to be higher because we know what can happen in those situations.
gotcha.
The closest agency will be dispatched. Yeah, you might be having the sheriff's department actually handle the call itself, but my police department might respond because we're closer to assist. So we
I
might
see what
be
you're
there on
saying.
scene faster, and then the agency that actually handles that area will come
When they
along
show up,
as soon as they show up. Yeah, and then they'll
transfer
take
it.
over the investigation. But in the meantime, we can get there to help calm things down. That's not always
That's
the case
really,
because you could live in the middle of absolute nowhere where it's only going to be the sheriff's department.
Right. That's an interesting thing, though. I did not realize that agencies assisted like that. And that would have given me some hope at times. So that's good to know. I think that it's really also something to touch on from your perspective. If somebody is not in physical abuse, but they are in this mental abuse, they're being stalked digitally, electronically. And by that, I mean your emails are being skimmed and reviewed, read. Your texts, your calls are monitored. I mean, you're in every part of your daily life is
Hmm.
monitored inside your home. And how would somebody, is there any hope? Like if I were to have called the police and said, like, this is what's happening, would you have come knowing that there wasn't like, even if I had called when it wasn't a rageful moment, and I did reach out to you when I finally had to start getting some mental grounding for like, this isn't normal. Is this normal? Right? Because I was so mentally screwed up, Mark. And you know that. You have to have known when I finally first reached out to you and I'm like, this is all the stuff that's happening and I did blah, 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 right? I just like purged all of that out of me. And you were probably like, whoa.
Calm down, Nita.
Yeah. But you did give me some resources and some ideas. But what happens? It would be like in my experience, I would honestly I would have had death first before calling the police. And I don't know what that was about me, but I think it was because I knew that because there was no physical hits on me,
Hmm.
that there seemed to be no reason to call the police. And that's what he would say. Call him. Call him. You're going to be the crazy one. You're going to be the abusive one.
Yeah.
Or- And that's what they
No, I hear what you're saying.
do.
So we respond far more verbal domestics, situations like that than we do physical
Okay.
domestics, which is good in a
Yeah.
lot of ways.
Yeah.
Obviously,
Yeah.
we don't want
Yeah.
people to be injured.
Right.
So we encourage you to call. We don't have a magic pill that'll solve everything overnight. We can't, say that by us responding, everything's going to get resolved because that's not going to be the case. It takes time to get into these situations. It takes time to get out of these situations.
Yes, it
But
does.
yes, yes, it does.
Sorry.
But I will say that no, talk over me all you want. I really don't care. It's totally cool. Stop me because I tend to talk. I would
Yeah.
say one thing that happens. So I'll be honest. I'm not really sure as far as the harassment portion of it goes. We have such laws called like telephonic harassment. If somebody's constantly text messaging you and blowing up your phone, you told them stop, things like that, then they can be charged criminally. When it
Oh.
comes to a spouse reading your emails that are your private account, it probably is criminal if you're not given permission to. But at the same time, we'd be like, well, why haven't you changed the password? You have control over that.
Oh, you don't have
Why
control
haven't
over that
you?
because they have control over your mind. I know it
And
sounds really, really
there is that.
crazy.
But that's where we're like, well, you're allowing them to still have access, so we're probably not going to be able to charge them criminally because you have stuff you take that you're not taking. Understandably, as to why, you're in this mindset of I have no power, and
Right.
it's hard to break out of that and look at it from the outside. Because if you were to take yourself, if I take Nita and remove her from the situation and not tell her the actors involved, just give her a screenplay and be like, what's wrong with this screenplay? What's wrong with the dialogue lines you're reading here? You'd be like,
Um,
this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. I'm like, hey, now here's the cover sheet. It tells you who the actors are. And you'd be like, oh my
yeah.
goodness, that's me and that's my
Ex.
formerly, spouse. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because
You know,
you're seeing
go
it from a
ahead.
different angle.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And what I'm hearing consistently through our conversation is that really by getting the resource of the police into the conversation, what they're doing is continually educating that family, that victim, and that abuser that this is not normal. And all of those reinforcing drops in the bucket can actually help activate somebody to changing their situation, seeing their situation. Because quite honestly, like in active abuse, we don't even see it. We just
Yeah.
don't see it. It's our normal. And that has to be incredibly frustrating for you guys on repeat calls. And from our side, that never call the police, we live in absolute terror that well, one, our fake life's going to get discovered and we'll have to figure this out. And that we are crazy, that we are the abuser. We live in that space. They control us in that space and manipulate us in that space of fear.
Well, and it's true. And I'll say, as police officers, we are human beings too. We have normal lives just like everybody else. We go home to our families. We watch TV. We walk around in our underwear sometimes. Whatever it is, we are just like everybody else.
Yeah.
And then we put on the uniform and we have to try to become like nobody else in a way while
Yeah.
still maintaining the human compassion and everything. And we will go to calls repeatedly and deal with the same characters, the same people. And because we're human, we will get frustrated with the
Yeah.
situation. Like, why aren't you leaving? We get called here every week or every other day. Just
Yeah.
leave the person, knowing in our head how difficult that is for us to say and how difficult it is for you to do. But we try to go in there, and you'll run across uh, deputies, officers, troopers, where we may have just come from a call where a person died. Let's say it's a traffic
Mm.
accident and
Yeah.
somebody died, and then we're responding to your call as our next call, and our mind's not in the right place. So you have to give us a little bit of compassion on your end
Grace.
sometimes, because yes,
Yeah.
because you don't know what we just dealt with. You don't know the traumas
That's
that
so
we have in our
true.
own lives that we take home and stuff. So we're not perfect. We're not going to respond the right way every single time we try to, because we're trying to do a service for you. But if you have that wrong interaction with a law enforcement officer one time, don't blow it off as that's the way it's going to be every single time, because the next person you talk to might have wisdom beyond their years, or because of their years of service, to give you that you never thought of, you know
Yeah.
um, and the things that we've encountered in our own lives that help us connect with people as well.
Yeah.
And I would say one thing, just make sure that if you need the help, whatever it is, even if it's just to have a little bit of a break from the yelling and screaming, call us, because it does a couple of things. One, it'll help you get that break. It'll help you have a little bit of space for some clarity. Two, it'll let the perpetrator, if there's one person who's really yelling, let him know, hey, law enforcement's aware of your actions right now. And
Yeah.
if we respond here because it escalates to the point where somebody gets injured, we're already going to be looking at you as the person we're taking away. And two, it records the incident, so you have a case number that you can refer back
Yeah.
to. Whether a physical report's written or not, we always have what's called CAD, or computer aided dispatch, where we get all of our original call information. As the dispatcher's talking to somebody, they're putting it in as notes saying, you know, the wife just called in, said her husband's screaming at her and she's got a 2-year-old and everything, whatever it is. And at the end of the call, we'll normally go in there and add our own note saying, talk to the wife. She said this, this, and this. We recommended this, this, and this. So now there's a case
Okay.
history being built. And if you need to at some point in the future, if have had enough of it, you realize this is a continuing pattern, you can reference those cases if it gets to the point where it meets the needs for like a restraining order
Right.
to be put in place by the court. You'll have documentation to back up what you're
Yeah.
saying, and not just he said, she said, but the police came here and responded and saw
Yeah.
XYZ and heard XYZ, and it's documented now.
And that's such a powerful statement right there. That leaving a covert abusive person, meaning it was all internal inside of our home. when I did finally leave and I did want to seek that restraining order, I didn't have enough evidence to get one.
Hmm.
I did not have enough evidence to get one. Had I been courageous enough just to call the police on our domestic moments, and towards the end in that last year, they were rolling. It was rolling rage through this house. And that affected, we have 4 children. That affected all of our children. We live far enough out in the country that, nobody ever called. Nobody ever heard it because we live quite a ways out. But when I went to protect myself and try to get a restraining order, I just did not have enough evidence to do it. And that was a really hurtful and frustrating part of my reality.
Yeah, because in your mind you're playing back. Well, he did this, this, and this, and this, and the court's
Right.
like, but you didn't call on. There's no record of it. It's all in your
Yeah.
head, and we can't say we're not going to invalidate
Yeah.
what you're saying. But honestly, there's a lot of people that'll lie out there out of
Yeah.
out of spite. Like,
Yeah.
well, he's doing this, so I'm gonna ruin his life and do this
Right.
and make things up. And we're in the middle. We don't know what the
Yeah. You
truth
don't know
is.
who's telling the truth.
We
Right.
like to say that we're good judges of character and we can look at the situation and be more willing to believe one person over the other. But unless there's an independent witness, and we explain independent does not mean your mom is on your side telling you that the other person, that's not independent. She's your mom, she's more likely going to be on your side. Now, if your mom is saying, no, he's the victim, my daughter is a screw up, well, like, you know what?
Right.
That's
May-
more believable for us.
yeah, that
So,
probably is. I
I
think that
mean, yeah.
go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, just reiterate that how important and how valuable those moments of a courageous act of asking the police to step in and calm down a situation can have massive payoffs later and down the road for when you try to get away from an abuser.
Yeah. And, I'm not a lawyer, so don't take any of my words legal fact, but I would say, um, if you're really in a bad situation and they're making threats that they'll never make in front of anybody else or admit
Yeah,
to,
yeah.
record them. Don't, just record it on your phone. Uh,
And what can you do with that?
you could, if it's of a criminal nature, like I'm gonna kill you or whatever it is like that, you can hang on to it because it's gonna be proof that they are truly, evil people, or just validates what you're saying. It may or may not be used in a criminal court, just depending on the circumstances. There are exemptions to being able to record somebody without their knowledge. Usually, it's a two-party state, so both people have to be aware of it.
Oh,
If you're on a phone call, one party can do it, and the other party doesn't have to be aware of it at all. But
too.
I would still do it because if you're in fear for your life and safety, like I said, I haven't researched this, so don't take it as legal gospel. You can run it by a lawyer or something, but I would not hesitate to record things of that nature. Um,
The reason that I asked on that is that I was recorded. I was recorded at the end of my marriage, and that's actually how we got to that point of separation. You and I talked a lot about that because I didn't know what to do with that. Because I did not want him to lose his job.
mhm.
And then there came a point where it was like, I need to be safe. And as frustrating as that being recorded was, it was that catapult that actually got us to separate. And that was good. But, you know, being recorded in at my car, my bedroom, the garage, the living room, like everywhere I went, I was under observation without my knowledge or consent. And it was
Mhm.
a creepy realization. And so I totally respect and understand what you're saying. And there's a difference between the two, recording
There's
for
a
your
huge difference.
safety and recording to spy, recording to control are night and day.
Oh,
They're
absolutely.
night and day. And that's a really that's a really interesting part of the conversation, because that had I had the courage to do that, it really does come down to, Mark, break like when you're breaking out of mind control and physical control. Sometimes you have to have moments of courage, and moments of courage, if you can act on those, they will have massive dividends down the road. It's just getting that courage to act in that moment. And anything that you can do, I have learned through my experience, which now is over 2 years in separation. And this September, it'll be 2 years working on a divorce, because there's no mediating from a person who isn't going to let you go.
Hmm.
They're he's just not. And so any of those things that you've talked about that I could have done would help me to legally get away from this person.
Yeah, and I'm glad you made the distinction between the two. You don't want to go around just recording everybody just for doing that, because that will get you in trouble. But like I said, if it's something that can help prove that this person is a danger to you or mentally unstable, whatever it is, recording segments of violent outbursts is helpful, not only for you to go back and listen to when you're in a calmer, safer place,
God, that's so true.
for you to be able to like whoa, what was I
Yeah.
allowing that to happen for? You know,
Yeah.
um, that alone is a huge wake up for people, to be able to replay and be like, wow, I can't believe I allowed him to yell at me like that in front of our kids, and whatever it is. Um,
Yeah, that would be a huge help for my situation. It's that mental breaking away of that was the normal. Because as you start
mhm.
to relearn a different normal, it those rageful scenarios now you see them so differently. And so if I had anything like that I was able to go back and listen to, it would be like gold right now, because it would just be such a solidifying agent around all the work that I have done to pull my children and I out of abuse and relearn a normal. So I
And it's
totally
very true,
understand what you're
because
saying.
when you get away from a situation, your mind starts to tell you that wasn't so bad. I don't know what
Yeah,
I was thinking that was such a big deal for. I can totally go back and things will be better. And I overreacted. I blew things out of proportion. That's not really accurate. That's not the way it happened.
and that's what they'll
We
be
we do
telling
that.
you as well. Yes.
Yeah. And so you're like, my mind's telling me that, they're telling me that it must be true. I'm gonna go back. But
That's
then you
it.
have the independent stuff to say, nope, time out. I was right. You're wrong.
Yeah.
Time heals wounds. It's true. And unless you have super mental, agility, and your mind just remembers every little thing and the way it happened at the time, we tend to gloss over the pain and remember the better parts of things. That's just the way we're kind of wired, I think, in a lot of ways.
Oh, it is.
And it's a
Yeah.
danger. It's a
It,
danger that you'll fall back into that same trap.
oh, definitely. And especially with a covert narcissist, they will manipulate you because they've normalized that. They have normalized all of those abusive things. What would you so do you have any advice for my I have a lot of men who reach out who are in active abuse, who are in, they just feel very controlled and ashamed of where they're at. Do you
Mm-hmm.
have any advice for men who might be in that situation, and kind of flipping that role of
I
everybody
know,
thinks
right?
of domestic abuse as just being male to woman, um, you know, uh, in
Well,
that
I'll
abusive
say,
way.
you guys fought for equal rights for so long, and I totally say absolutely no problem with that at all. But with that comes equal rights for women to abuse men, and it's been going on for a very long, long time. It was
Yeah,
just not considered the manly thing to do to talk about it, and
right.
I think everybody's realized that's complete BS. There's no manly thing about being abused, period, or allowing it to happen. I think it's unmanly to allow it to happen on a continuous basis. We do get calls where, like I said, it's a controlling female, and it's clear, the guy loves her, just the same exact scenario, but in reverse.
Flipped.
Guy loves her to death, or is afraid that she's going to try to ruin his career. She's going
Yeah.
to do X, Y, and Z, accuse him of things. And in the past, if a woman said he did this or that, it was more prone to believe the woman than the man. That
Yeah.
is kind of changed in a lot of ways because we have realized that there are a lot of women out there that are manipulative, that will do and say whatever they can to maintain control or to get the other person in trouble. And so we are more prone to listen to both sides very clearly and be like, we may not have the answer. We may not know exactly what's going on is factual from either side, but we would definitely listen to a male side of things, and talking to a woman, we could probably verify that what they're saying is more accurate than not. So I would say call us the same way, give us a call and
Yeah.
see what we can do to help you, to give you resources. You are not alone out there by any stretch of the imagination. I've talked to plenty of men that have come from domestic situations that were abusive or even physically abusive, and they were afraid to report it because of whatever the reason was.
Yeah.
They didn't want to come across as being weak, allowing a woman to beat on them, but at the same time, they were probably raised, you don't hit a woman. So you
Right.
don't
Yeah.
defend yourself. And I'm not encouraging people to, hit women at all,
No. Yeah.
or vice versa, of course, but
It
abuse is abuse,
explains why
regardless
people
of the
get there.
gender.
Yeah.
And, I want to say two things. One, you don't have to call us while a situation's actively going on. If
Really?
you want to call in and report something by phone so that the other partner doesn't know about it, we'll do that. We'll talk to you on the phone. We'll take your information. You could tell us as much as you want to. It's kind of the same thing. I know this is a slightly different topic, but if somebody was sexually assaulted, which happens
Hmm.
in intimate
Yeah.
relationships all the
It
time,
does.
just because
Yeah.
you're married or just because you've been dating for a long time or whatever, a, a sexual assault is a sexual assault. There's
Yeah.
no limitation that says, oh, well, now you signed this piece of paper, so this no longer applies and you are required to do X, Y, and Z. That's
Right.
not what happens. And if you were to call on a sexual assault, there's a variety of options that we try to follow. And, first one would be to listen to you. And if you just want to just talk about it and that's it and nothing else happens, we will abide by that. If you want to talk about it and file a report with information and decide later on whether you want to go forward with it, we'll do that too. If you want to go
Okay.
full blown, we'll do that. So don't hesitate to call for whatever it is and just talk to us on the phone. If you're afraid for us to show up to your place of work, whatever, call from a friend's phone. If you're afraid that your phones
Okay.
are being tracked.
Yeah.
Um, and there's a general information phone number and hotline that probably most people don't know about. And it's really simple. It's 211. If you dial
Oh.
211, or if you go to 211info.org,
Hmm.
it's a ton of resources available for everything from I need shelter, I'm in a crisis, I need employment help, rental help, mental health help, dental, whatever it is, addiction resources, physical health, abuse, sexual health, all that stuff. They will direct you to the best resources in your area to help you start that process. And
So is
mhm,
that across the whole US?
that is in Oregon, and I think it might be Washington as well, at least for this number. I'm sure other states have the same type of program going on.
Okay,
but I know this
gotcha.
is Oregon's.
Gotcha, gotcha. Okay. That's an amazing resource.
Yeah, so Oregon and Southwest Washington use the 211info.org or just
Okay,
dialing 211 on your phone.
gotcha. That's massive.
Yeah, it's really cool.
And I'm sure that a lot of states and communities have resources like that. And 2 years down the road, when I've looked at out there for resources, there have been so many more than I ever dreamed possible. So
And
it
that
is,
tells you something right there. It tells you you are not
yeah,
alone, right?
I know that's
If
so,
there's so many resources out there, it's because a
oh,
lot of people are dealing with the exact same thing and
that's
have
so
needed those
powerful.
resources.
That's so powerful because you get locked in that space, that tiny little box inside your head that you think you're so alone and you're not. And that's important to know.
Well, I
It's
mean,
important to
look at
know.
it from this way. People who knew you before you came out with all of this, right?
Yeah,
People who looked at your life from the outside would have been never suspecting
no,
that this was going on.
right.
And I bet you look at a lot of your friends and family members, and they're hiding the same or similar types of events in their lives that
Yeah,
nobody knows about because they don't talk. It's
yeah,
taboo. We don't want to let people know that we're dysfunctional, that
right.
we have the same issues that everybody else has. It's like a failure in our lives if we can't control, if we don't have a successful marriage, we don't have a successful family, if our kids are acting out or getting in trouble, it's all of our fault. And it's like, no, we can only control ourselves. We can't control everybody else in our relationship, in our world.
Yeah.
And because of that, things happen and we're not alone in things happening. So
Mhm.
once you realize that you're not alone in that and that you're not in a unique situation, that these things happen and you don't need to suffer through it, it helps you to break that cycle and say, I'm better. I deserve more. I deserve better. I don't want to show my children that this is something that's okay. I want them to learn that mom, dad, they were strong enough to stand up and say, no, I'm not going to
Yeah.
allow the abuse to continue. And then when they see that that's not okay, they realize for their relationships that it's not okay and they don't become
Yeah.
abusers or victims.
That's so powerful. Like everything that you just encapsulated there, Mark, is it's taken me 2 years to get to that spot, to understand all that and to see it that way. And that's so powerful. And hopefully, not hopefully, I know that there will be people who listen to everything that you have just said and really feel it sink in, right? It'll just add to their strength and their resolve that they do have options and choices out there. I think that's so great. Everything that you just, well, the whole interview has been amazing. But that end
Well,
part about like you can only control yourself, I never knew that. And it's so basic.
I like to think that we are just holding a little hammer and a little tiny like ice pick, and we're barest hole in that dam of emotions and just all of the stuff that you hold back from the rest of the world. And we're
Yeah.
hoping that what is allowed to seep out will just make the whole thing destroy itself and come rushing down. And the barriers are gone now, where you can actually seek help and find the resolve to get better and do better. And you talked about counseling, and
Mhm.
for the longest time I was like, oh yeah, counseling's fine and it's okay and everything. I'm a very strong proponent of counseling,
Mhm.
because you get to run your ideas off of somebody that's not involved in your day-to-day situation and what
Yeah.
they don't know all the ins and outs of your family dynamics until you tell them for the first time, and they have a totally clear view of what it is without being emotionally involved,
Yeah.
and can recommend the course of action that is best for you. And you may not find the best counsel the first time around. If somebody's not working out for you, find somebody else. Personalities differ. Uh, Counseling strategies differ.
Yeah.
So try it. You can get free counseling through different organizations, and it can be kept confidential.
Yeah.
They don't go and report to the state, oh, I'm seeing so and so for XYZ. That is protected by law. But they can give you a lot of tools to look at your life in a different perspective and realize where abuse actually is, point out things that you never thought of, and help to further break down those barriers and those walls to help you become a more productive, happy individual.
That's an amazing full circle on from the beginning to the end. And you're absolutely right. People benefit from finding the right therapist or type of therapy, because there are a lot of different avenues for that to go. But it takes you a long time to get to that point where you're open and able to start, honestly, like you're brave enough to go down that route. And the therapists that I've been exposed to, they're not trying to get into your head. They're not trying to control you, manipulate you, or they're just really trying to get you to understand your role in your own life. And if you've never been allowed to have that, that's a terrifying thing to get to.
And it's terrifying to want to even begin because you're afraid of them saying, no, you're wrong, you're doing this and you're doing
Uh-huh.
that. And it's like,
Judging you. Yeah.
they don't really judge. They might
Uh-uh.
strongly recommend that you do something differently because they know it's healthier for you,
Yeah.
but they're not going to belittle you, or they know that you're going to have all the same faults that they do.
Yeah.
Counselors see counselors. It's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah. That's so
Yeah.
true. I
So
I
don't
think
be
I was
afraid of that.
surprised. Yeah. I think, yeah, you're right. Just removing the shame and stigma around the entire process, from the beginning of that first realization that, oh my gosh, this isn't okay to be screamed at. And if you choose, and when you choose, and hopefully you choose to call the police and start to get that idea that this is not normal, because it's set from listening to you and watching as much TV as I do, not reality TV, but police TV, right? They show, you guys are human. It's exactly what you said. You guys show up and you really try to help people walk through what's normal, what's not, and get to the truth within a situation. And the more times that people like myself, that if the more times that I exposed myself to other ideas and other interpretations of my reality, and I did that through secret research on the internet, which just drove my abuser insane, just insane, because he was, of course, trying to control my access to the outside world and to these other ideas. But the more that you get those ideas, the quicker, safer, the quicker you will find a path to becoming a safer, in being in a safer environment. Whew, that took me a minute to get there.
It happens.
Oh my gosh. Mark, I'm gonna close out our interview here in a moment, but do you have anything else that you want to share that you're just like, oh my gosh, I need to be sure people know this too?
Uh, uh, no, the only thing I was just thinking that I didn't really touch on was, we show up to a situation. If you do call us and both parties are there, like I said, we don't know what else is happening. And so we may not be able to determine what story is accurate, what story is true. We have to
Yeah.
take things with a giant grain of salt because people lie to us, believe it or not, right?
Yeah.
Surprise, surprise. So don't let that be discouraging to you if the outcome you were hoping doesn't happen the first time around.
Okay.
Especially if it's a new thing where you've called for the first time and we've never been to your house, we've never talked with anybody, we don't know
There's no pattern.
you guys at all. We don't know anything.
Yeah.
But if we're getting more calls, and this isn't, we usually do have a feeling for what's the truth and stuff, but there are times when we just don't know. We can't
Yeah.
read people's minds. We can't beat people to tell us the truth. It just doesn't work that way. But don't let that keep you from calling if you need to call, because like it does establish that pattern. That does establish the fact that you are in a situation where you need help of whatever nature it is. So, like I said, you can call us just to talk on the phone, and you can request phone contact. You can tell the dispatcher directly, phone contact. There's
Oh,
a
okay.
non-emergency number you can call if you need to call somebody. You don't have to call 911, because unless it's a life-threatening emergency, don't call 911. Just call the non-emergency number. Goes to the same people, same place. They just take it at the next lower priority. So they'll handle 911 calls first. So, somebody's in cardiac arrest. They want to take that
Right.
versus, I'd like to talk to an officer about a domestic situation going on. That's
Right.
not 911. If you are in a physical altercation, that is 911, because things escalate pretty, quickly.
Yeah.
So yeah, just feel free to call. And like I say, you don't have to call us if you don't want to. You can call the 211 number for Oregon and Southern Washington, and they could get you to resources that help with domestic abuse. They help you, like if you are in a bad situation where you need to get out of that house and you're just like, I have nowhere to go. There are tons of resources to find you a place that same day. And if not that same day, which is very rare, the next day. Shelters where they're hidden, like even law enforcement may not know where the location is because they want it
That
really
hidden.
kept. Yeah,
Yeah.
they want to
Yeah.
make sure that nobody will be able to find where you're at. For abused women, for abused men, there are resources for you to get help today. And I just want to
Well,
encourage you to seek it.
that's, yeah, I think that that's a really important thing when you just touched on the hidden, because when you've been stalked in your own intimate relationship, stalked to the point of like you don't know that your text messages or your emails are being skimmed. I mean, they're not just picking up your phone and looking at it. They're literally having secret like copies of them secretly sent to them. And then you find this out by accident. It starts to build in your brain that nothing in your life is that you have any privacy at all or any right to privacy. So when you do finally make that step to break away, the fear is overwhelming. Real or not, the fear is overwhelming, and it really breaks down your ability to seek help and get away. So knowing that there are spaces that are that hidden, it's a really important and valuable part of the conversation for people who need to go that route. So thank you for that.
Anytime.
I appreciate so much you giving me this time. And thank you so much from the bottom of my heart, Mark. Thank you for jumping in and guiding me when I needed help the most, for really being a little harsh with me at times. Like, you've got to call your policing agency and report that. Um, really holding me to a higher standard of self worth and self love. You have been a friend and a resource through this entire journey, and I really appreciate that. And I want to thank you for coming on my podcast and sharing your knowledge with a broader base of people. And it's really, really valuable. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me on. And I've been truly blessed to have you as a friend too, because you've been there for me for a lot of things as well. So it's a two-way street, my friend.
Thank you, Mark. I look forward to talking to you soon.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Wasn't that a great informational resource and tool? I'm so happy that we were able to finally coordinate a time. We've been trying for close to a year, and I'm really glad that it worked out today. I think that I think there's some people who might have some questions, who might have some, thoughts or things that they need to bounce off of somebody. And I would encourage you to never hesitate to reach out to your own police department and have that conversation. Certainly, if you need some help having that conversation, reach out to me and I can help you create that conversation in your community. Or we can likely bounce something off Officer Slagle if needed. But to Officer Slagle, thank you so much. And to all of the listeners, thank you guys for coming and showing up and being present and helping break the cycle of abuse. You are warriors, and I appreciate each and every single one of you. Give me a follow, A Glimpse into the Moment. Go on over to whatsup.org and give us a follow over on Team Sharudo. Thank you guys. Have an amazing day.